Welcome to this episode of Movement Medicine Podcast. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in so far. We really appreciate all the feedback that we've received. Please continue to share with your friends, your family, and your colleagues. We thank our partners for the podcast. So that's the Fit India movement, the Back to Fitness Clinic, which is the clinic that Rajat runs, La Ultra the High, which is the race that Rajat puts together in Ladakh, and also the Moving Mountains Within Film, which is the film about the 10th edition of La Ultra the High. So I'll hand over to Rajat now, who's going to introduce today's guest.
Thank you, everyone, for signing in to yet another episode of Movement Medicine. And we have a special guest today, Dr. Aashish, Contractor. We've known each other for the last 15, 16 years now. So Aashish, welcome on board, buddy.
Thanks, Rajat. Thanks, Darren.
Could you just jump in directly and talk about your academic and professional career, please?
Okay. So I did my medicine from Mumbai in India. I was at the TN Medical College. And after I finished it, I've always had an interest in sports, like the two of y'all. And this was in, I think, 1994, 95, at the end of 95, finished internship and wanted to go abroad to do sports medicine. So interestingly, at that time, with the information available, sports medicine really meant, or at least in my head, treating injuries with sports players' injuries. And then I went to the US and I was there for a while and at the University of Virginia. And among the many courses I took there were also things related to exercise physiology, cardiac rehabilitation. And I sort of tended to drift more towards the whole sports cardiology, preventive cardiology, cardiac rehab area. So then I kind of moved focus a little bit from a pure sort of injury treatment perspective with athletes, more to the whole, sports cardiology and the whole what we call exercises medicine movement today. Trying to get people to get active, because as we all know, that exercise is great for chronic disease prevention as well as treatment. Then I worked in the US for a few years. And then decided to come back to India because at that time, at least, there wasn't any real formal sort of cardiac rehab, preventive cardiology in that space. So that's kind of in a nutshell what led me to where I am.
Fantastic. That's absolutely incredible. So can you tell us about your personal sort of fitness and exercise journey?
Okay. So in school, I used to play tennis with some degree of seriousness, and I was a bit of a late bloomer because I took up the sport only at the age of 12 or 13, and for tennis, that's pretty late. And in India, by the time you get to your 10th grade, you really need to take a decision between academics and sport, at least way back in the sort of late 80s, that's the way it was. You couldn't kind of do both as a lot of people are doing today. And unfortunately, sport is the one that got dropped. And that was the end of my so-called sporting career. I've always been interested in sports. And then when I was in the US studying, in university especially, what really kind of opened my eyes was that everybody was taking up long distance running. So growing up, you always thought that the marathon was something which, only world-class athletes did, or you had to be super fit to be able to run one. And then in university, I saw that there were young people, old people, thin people, big people, just all sorts, running long distances. And whether it was in the morning at 6 a.m. or at night at 11:30 p.m., whether it was, 5 degrees centigrade or whether it was, 30 degrees, people were running. And that got me kind of into running. And then when I was working in the US, one of the people I work with came and said that they're going to be training for the London Marathon. And I said, are you crazy? He said, no, why don't you sort of come along? And the only way you could get into the London Marathon that late in the game was through charity. So I remember we raised money for the American Diabetes Association, and this was in 99. And we got a sort of all expenses paid trip to London to run the marathon. And that was the first time I ever did distance running. So I think I trained for about 6 months to 8 months, and that was a great experience. After that, when I came back to India in 2001, I used to do distance running, and people gave you strange looks because at that time, distance running wasn't something which was very, very common. And then in 2004, the Mumbai Marathon got started, and I was fortunate to be at the ground level because the hospital I worked for at the time, the Asian Heart Institute, was the medical partner. So I've been with the Mumbai Marathon kind of ground up in the planning, especially the medical coverage planning. And so got very involved in that. And because of doing the actual medical coverage, I was not able to run it. But then from 2010 onwards, I used to do the half marathon. And the last 5 years, I've been doing the full. Nowhere near the ultra that Rajat organizes and probably runs himself, but been running marathons. And last year, I got into the triathlon. So I did my first half Ironman in Turkey in November 2019, which again was a great experience. So right now, all of that has been stopped, as you know, but otherwise long distance running, and now hopefully the triathlon is what interests me.
So Ashish, how about talking about your patients who are there and them doing the half marathons and the full marathons? Please tell us
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So what's actually very interesting is that the cardiac rehab facility that I started at the H&R Institute and the Mumbai Marathon almost kind of started at the same time. So as you know, that all patients who have a bypass surgery, who have an angioplasty, they're advised exercise. And typically the exercise that most people do is just walking at a moderate pace. But once these patients started doing that, it kind of struck me that why can't they do more if they want to? So in the first edition of the Mumbai Marathon, they also had what's called a dream run. Of course, that's been continued in every edition, which at the first edition was 7 kilometers. Now it's 6 kilometers. And I thought that if my patients can walk for an hour, and that's what we advise them to do, why can't they kind of, maybe slow jog for an hour? So we asked them, and many of them were interested. So in the first edition in 2004, we had 26 of them taking part in the dream run, which was a big deal for sort of our Indian society back then, because most people were not taking part in any sort of distance event. Forget people who are over the age of 55 and 60 and who had heart disease. So that was a bit of a culture shock. And I remember they all got written about a lot, and they had their pictures taken with their bare torsos showing their bypass surgery marks and all of that. So after that, when they started doing more, some of them came up to me and said, what next? We've done this 6 kilometer, 7 kilometer, and it's been fun, but what next? And I spoke to our chief cardiac surgeon who had operated on most of them, Dr. Panda, and he was actually also very supportive, saying, hey, if the patients want to do more, why not? Let's go ahead and do more. And then we gradually kind of took baby steps, and over a year built them up. And that's become kind of a nice movement now, because every year now we have about 30, 40 of them doing the half marathon. A few of them, a handful, do the full. In fact, one of our patients did all the major marathons all around the world after that, the 6 majors as they call them. And last year he also went to Antarctica, and he wrote a lovely blog after it. And it was a great experience. So, and now it's not, when someone says they've had heart disease and they run a long distance, nobody is that shocked anymore, which is nice, because that message has gone out there. Because I think, Rajat, as you probably also saw in Delhi, is that everybody wants to know somebody who's done something. And once they know, oh, so-and-so who lives in the next building could do it, why can't I? And that's that. And these are the change makers. So I have to always pep them up and tell them, remember, you're not just doing it for yourself. When you do it, there are 100 or 1,000 others who will look and say, oh, if so-and-so could do it at the age of 60 after this condition, then there's no reason why I can't. So I think it's been a great movement all over the country, at which, of course, I know you're an integral part of it. And I think that's really helped our country. And Fit India and all those initiatives are all part of offshoots of those.
That's absolutely fantastic. So I just wonder whether you could tell us a little bit more about sort of the program of cardiac rehabilitation in India. So I'm sure you're aware, in the UK, we have quite sort of discrete phases of rehabilitation, all the way through to phase 4, which is the community-based rehabilitation, where sort of exercise professionals would actually take these patients through sort of gradual progressions of exercise. Is it a similar process in India?
Yes, it is. It is, Darren. In fact, I've been to the UK very often. I'm in close touch with all the people at the BACPR, which is the British Association of Cardiovascular Prevention and Rehab. So David Wood and John Buckley and all of them are very close personal friends. And the program is similar, but ours is a little more tailored towards the American model, which is that once the patient is discharged and they go home, they come back and then we do a telemetry monitored session for them. So which essentially means, for the rest of your viewers, we attach electrodes on their chest and they have a small little unit which transmits their ECG wirelessly. So we call phase 1 when they're in the hospital. Phase 2 is once they go home and they come back and we monitor their ECG while they're exercising. And today, thanks to technology, we're also telemonitoring our patients. So they could be at home and they could have a strap around their chest. There's an Indian company called Fourth Frontier, which is making them now. And we can wirelessly monitor them from wherever we are. So that's phase 2. Phase 3 is a step down version. And phase 4, like you said, is a community-based program where they sort of come back and they're healthy, and then we're pushing them to lead what we'd call normal, healthy lives.
So, Aashish, I mean, just about the patients who are there, what would you have to say if someone's having cardiac issues or not yet have had the surgery versus say 20 years ago? What is the advice today? What they should be doing exercise-wise? What would you have to say to them?
Yeah, so 20 years ago, or maybe even earlier, in fact, if you go back, even say 50 or 60 years ago, if somebody had a heart attack, the advice was that they had to be in bed, like literally in bed for 6 weeks. They weren't allowed to even go to the toilet, in their own house. They used to have a bedpan. So 6 weeks was complete bed rest. And today we know we do the exact opposite. The moment someone's had a heart issue and the moment they're stabilized in the ICU itself, we get them sitting on the bed, we get them sitting on the chair, they start taking the first few steps in the ICU itself, provided there are no other sort of complications that are happening. And by the time they leave the hospital, most are able to walk somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. Often those who have staircases at home which they need to climb, we give them a bit of practice in the hospital, so they've actually climbed the staircase before going home. And they're encouraged to be more and more active, including weight training. Weight training, or the more sort of accurate term, resistance training, was a big taboo for people with blood pressure, for people with cardiac. Used to tell them, oh, stay away from it. And now we know that's just not true. Now, weight training doesn't have to be bodybuilding, where you kind of sort of got to be like an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Salman Khan if you're in India. But it's just a question of lifting resistance. I joke with my patients that you're afraid to lift a weight, but can you lift a 1 liter bottle of water out of the refrigerator? And they say, of course you can. So what's a 1 liter bottle of water? It's a 1 kilo weight or a 2-pound dumbbell. So it doesn't, it could be with simple resistance band exercises, using home objects, hand weights. So we want people to include resistance training and cardiovascular training, again, as part of the lifestyle for all chronic diseases, frankly, not just heart disease.
So obviously we've spoken a lot about rehabilitation from these particular cardiac events, but what about prevention? What's the role of exercise, specifically aerobic and resistance exercise, for the prevention of cardiac disease?
Yeah. So Darren, again, there are tons of papers with literally today millions of participants. For example, the Cooper Clinic study in Dallas in the US, that's a great longitudinal database which they've been monitoring right from the 1970s onwards. And it's shown without a shadow of doubt that those who participate in regular exercise, both aerobic and resistance training, have a lower risk of developing heart disease, cardiovascular disease, stroke, almost to a tune of 50%. And to be honest, it's not just heart disease. They've shown it in many different types of cancer, diabetes, pretty much any chronic disease. So this whole concept of, as you all are also propagating, movement is medicine, exercise is medicine. So pretty much any chronic disease is kept at bay by exercise up to a degree of 50%. Even they've shown something like Alzheimer's, which people are obviously worried about as they age. And so regular exercise has been shown to increase your neurons. So earlier you used to think that you couldn't, once your brain cells died, they died forever. But now we know that neurogenesis is possible. A healthy diet, regular exercise, and constant learning in life keeps your brain cells healthy as well. So I think exercise is, if all the good effects of exercise could be put in a pill, I think by far it would be the best-selling drug in the world, and all of us would make millions if we could just somehow package all the benefits of exercise in the pill.
Totally, Ashish. Ashish, taking it to the next level, our colleagues, most of them are what they are, which is not very active. So that's one part of it. And second is, even if they're active, they kind of stop doing the activity as soon as the heart rate reaches a 65% or a 70%.
Right.
If they are so scared to move, how can they prescribe movement to others? So how do we change that?
So, I'll answer it in two ways. The one is, I'm actually, to be honest, Rajat, I'm quite optimistic, because in the recent past, okay, in the last 5 or 6 years, the amount of doctors that I know in Mumbai who are actually actively running long distances has grown exponentially. Now, maybe I'm seeing a biased sample set because that's the crowd I'm hanging around with. But in general, I think that there has been a shift in attitude, where first they were very wary of it. Now more and more doctors, even if they don't do it themselves, they are encouraging it. There are very few doctors you come across today who are, if I may say so, dismissive about exercise. So I think that attitude has definitely changed. And there are a number of doctors, at least in Mumbai, whom I know personally, who are very active. I know that you spoke to Anand Joshi a few days ago, and Ante, as we call him, he's 60 plus, and he cycles like he's 25 years old, and he's I think at least 5 or 6 weeks of the year he's cycling in some nice part of the world, whether it's Sri Lanka or Sikkim or Italy. And I think more and more doctors are following the lead. So I've got this cycling group that we have in Mumbai. It's called Worli 545, and out of about 15 active members, about 5 of them are doctors. So I think that this the message is certainly getting out there, and hopefully they're leading by examples where their patients are concerned. Because again, even research has shown that patients are more likely to exercise or lead healthy lifestyles if they see that their doctor is doing the same. So I think it's working.
That's great. So are there any sort of misconceptions within the field of cardiac rehabilitation that you could address for us?
So in terms of misconception, I think we've kind of spoken about some of this, where people were, wary. Am I too old? Am I too exercise, too move? Is there something like too much exercise? That's something which has been gaining a lot of attention. This whole concept of, can you exercise too much? And I tell my patients, at least, that please remember that when we talk about studies of doing too much, it's a completely different level from what regular 3 to 5, 6 days a week aerobic exercise is. And there are no downsides to doing regular exercise 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 3 to 5 days a week. The other misconception that sometimes people have, and this is a strange thing to say, is that I've seen in our Indian setting, is that when somebody loses weight, their family members tend to get very worried. Is something wrong with you? So I've always seen a 10-kilo person who's sort of not 10 kilo overweight person loses 5 kilos, the family gets much more worried compared to someone putting on weight. And I've just found that the strangest thing, that they find that if their patient has lost weight post an event, have they somehow become weak, or is something wrong with them? So I think that's not true. People also worry that, especially women, that, can they be doing any form of resistance training? Would that be negative for them? And the answer clearly is no, because again, I want to differentiate. There's a difference between what we call resistance training and sort of bodybuilding. So we're not advocating them to bodybuilding, it's just resistance training. Some of the other myths are the usual ones around cholesterol, around sugar, around blood pressure, that once you start medication, you always have to continue them for life. And this is not true just for heart patients, for anyone. The fact of the matter is that if you change your lifestyle enough, it may be possible, and I'm choosing my words carefully, it may be possible to reduce your medications, or at some point to even stop them. So it's not that if you started a blood pressure medication, it's always got to be there for life. So that's not true.
So another one is, Aashish, the sudden death, the hukum. And
Yes.
What tends to happen is the non-runners in the family.
Yes.
For the runners, they
Absolutely.
have a case, right?
Yes.
I mean, suddenly it's like, how bad is running for you? And they forget the fact that how many people are dying on a sofa watching television having potato chips.
You're absolutely right, Rajat. That's a pet topic of mine. And every time that there's a long distance race on a Sunday, and God forbid somebody somebody dies on Monday, it's the front page headlines. And obviously for that person, their family, their immediate friends, it's a tragedy. But I sometimes ask people that on that same Sunday, there were probably 5 people sitting at home, like you said, watching TV and eating potato chips, and who had an arrest. But that never makes it to the paper saying man sitting at home watching TV dies. And today, ironically, I have more people coming to me that their family is worried that they are running versus worried that they're too sedentary. And we need to, from a public health message, we need to put it in perspective to say, you know what, if the entire country got exercising, got walking, fit India, and the message here that we're making is moving from doing nothing to doing something. Like you said, just getting off the couch. That's the message we're talking about. Once you get off the couch, and this whole concept of too much exercise is a different ball game altogether. It's a very nuanced topic, which maybe we need to have a different podcast to talk about. But as a public health message, certainly people shouldn't be afraid of exercising. They need to get off their couch and they need to go and do something. 20 to 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 5-6 days a week is a great public health message. And brisk walking is good enough. And once you're brisk walking, if you want to do something more, by all means you should. I tell all the people I come across, you do not have to run a marathon just to get the health benefits of exercise. If you want to, go ahead and do it. Speak to your coach or your doctor and go ahead and do it. But you shouldn't have this fear. But as a public health message, just getting out and exercising is what we want people to do.
So unfortunately, a lot of us are in this lockdown period at the moment where we can't go out for runs. If we're actually forced to be sitting on our couches, probably more than we should be. Have you got any advice as to how we can stay active during this time?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you kind of need to get yourself mentally into gear to sort of be ready for the long haul. I think how you approach it, your attitude, I think is very important. That's one of my favorite lines. The attitude will determine your altitude in life. So we need to kind of have I don't think one needs to have this sort of gung-ho type positive attitude, but at least you should be neutral towards it. There's a lot of fear. I think people should get that fear out of the mind and have a positive attitude, because if once you do that, once you're sort of mentally in a good place, only then can you, get your physical body in a good place as well. I think there's tons of stuff that can be done at home. From a strength perspective, if you just Google it online, there are lots of body weight exercises you can do. Something simple like body weight squats, push-ups. If you're not able to do a full push-up, you can start with a wall push-up. You can do a push-up, on your knees. If you have some TheraBands or light dumbbells at home, you could certainly use that. But there are enough routines, like a circuit routine of say 8-10 exercises, 4-5 for the upper body and 4-5 for the lower body, which can be done at home without any weights. And you could do, as you get fitter, maybe 2 or 3 rounds of those. Personally, I'm lucky enough to have a cycle at home and a trainer to which I can attach it to. And today with all the apps out there, you could be at home, but cycling on some mountain pass in Switzerland or in Italy, and with the friends of yours. I've been doing that about 3 times a week, getting on the bike. If you happen to have a skipping rope at home, skipping is a great exercise. For people who have buildings and they have a terrace to which they have an access to, maybe they can go and walk up and down. So I would advise that try and get in about 20 to 25 minutes morning and in the evening. I think if you split up your routine into maybe 20 minutes in the morning and 25 in the evening, I think it'll keep you both physically and mentally kind of active. And I think that you need to also be careful about your food, because by default, your physical activity is going to be less. Most people who live in India live in apartments which aren't that large, or they don't have backyards to which they can go out and walk in. So they are going to be restricted in movement. So try and, at least within the house, avoid sitting on your couch for more than say 20-25 minutes at a time. Even if you're working, you could stand and work on your computer or take your phone calls. Just keep moving. Still try and get those 8,000-10,000 steps in a day.
Aashish, this has been brilliant. Anything else, Aashish, that maybe we've missed, maybe you want to add for the audience?
No, I think we've covered a fair bit, and I think the idea is that what's unique about the situation we are in, this is probably the first time that the entire world is actually undergoing something together. Unfortunately, it's for a negative reason, but I think we all need to keep in mind that it's not, we're not alone, and we're all in it together. And I think that we need to keep both physically and mentally active. So when we come out of the other side, and which we will all come out on the other side, we all need to be better human beings, fitter, healthier. And in the meanwhile, keep your distance and make sure that when you're going outdoors, you got this on you. So thanks a lot, Rajat. Thanks, Darren. It was great chatting with you all.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Aashish.
Stay safe.
Yes, and you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.